Hello and welcome to this episode for Ponoko, a brand new podcast where we talk to some of the industry's biggest and brightest minds to see how things happen and figure out how small-time engineers or big-time engineers, no matter what you're doing, can go from zero to hero through prototyping, rapid production, and all the steps and issues that you may face along that journey. Now today I'm joined by a rather interesting guest, and I would love for you to just tell the audience who you are and what you do.
Hey, thanks for having me on. My name is Chris M. Walker. I have the M there not to be pretentious, but because there was a one-hit wonder in the 90s named Chris Walker, and I can't outrank him in Google no matter what I do, so I added my middle initial. So I always tell that joke as like a opening thing.
That sounds like an SOE. That sounds like an SOE SEO strategy. Sorry.
It absolutely is, because like if you search Chris Walker, he psychs up the whole thing, and since he was famous, I can't outdo him. So it is that, but it also is just a fun way to like introduce myself.
Brilliant.
Anyhow, my background, I started, well, let's go back to about 2013. I was working in IT as a like a level 1 tech support type person for a real estate company. Basically the person who, when you get locked out, you call them, they unlock your account, or they tell you to turn it on and off again. That was what I was doing. I hated it. Because it wasn't very fulfilling either financially or just whatever you want to call it as personally. And I was in a bit of credit card debt at the time. And I was randomly, instead of doing my job one day, I was just randomly like browsing the internet, and I found a blog post about affiliate marketing, which was something I'd never heard of at the time, but it sounded interesting. For the guy that wrote it was like doing that for his living. So I started researching that and started doing some of that on the side and started making a little bit of money and kind of got addicted to it from there. But there was a Google update that came out that made that stop working for me. So then I started doing search engine optimization for clients. So basically helping small businesses show up higher in Google so they get more business. And long story short, that led me to doing SEO freelancing, which led me to creating my platform Legiit, which helps businesses use technology to find problems with their business and then find freelancers to solve those problems for them. And that's kind of what brings me up to today. That was about 10 years in about 2 minutes. So.
Well, okay, right. That was 1 decade, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. So it's a rather interesting change that you went from, and I apologize for offending, a dead-end job that you didn't want to do anymore, to a business model that is something you absolutely love doing and have found a living doing that. So I think with that said, my first question to you would be, how did you find the courage to do something like that?
Well, first of all, before I answer that, I want to say that the job itself was not the problem. Some of those people are still my friends and they still watch this, and I always feel bad when I like dunk on it. I was the problem and not them. So just to get that disclaimer out there. So it's kind of like sales. In sales, the way you sell someone is you make the pain of not buying from you greater than the pain of buying from you. And with my job, it kind of got to that point where I was making enough money and I was miserable enough that the pain of being there was higher than the pain of not being there and the risk of, quitting and going on your own. On top of that, I was getting to the point where between my freelancing and my client SEO, that being there was costing me money. Like I didn't have the time to get new business and fulfill the current business and do my job. And something had to go. So the job eventually went. As far as the courage, I remember they had this is kind of a funny story, but they did they owned a lot of the real estate here in the city where I live. And one of the things they owned was a golf course, and they had their company meetings at the golf course. And shortly before my last day, or before I decided to put in my notice, I should say, they had a company meeting there, and the CEO was up and he was talking about how great things were going for the company and how they were making all this extra money for their shareholders. And then when we got back to our office, there was a notice that they were cutting some of our cell phone benefits because they paid for some of our cell phone because we had to be on call, and they were cutting some of the benefits on that, which, it wasn't that big of a deal, but because it was really like a matter of a few bucks.
But it sends a message, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Oh my good. That is right. I've got to tell you a very quick story of my own that my father told me, and this is brilliant. But I think because my dad works for a company, and he told me this as a lesson, kind of saying So long story short, the company had spent like 6 months on this big project. Everyone was overworked, overtired, but they finally got over the finish line, and they're all saying to each other like, "Oh man, we did it! You know, we finally got this thing sorted out in time." And the way that the manager of that department showed that their appreciation was they brought in a box of donuts. And and my dad basically said it would have been far better if they brought absolutely effing nothing, because it would have been less insulting than to be like, well done guys for breaking your backs, not spending time with your family, and how we're going to reward you, some donuts, thank you for doing it. If they just said nothing and gone, you guys did fantastically, well done, that would have been less insulting. And it reminds me of what you just mentioned, whereby you do all this hard work, the shareholders are getting more, the CEO's happy, to show their appreciation, they cut your phone benefits.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's just the easy illustration of the kind of stuff that I was facing. And then again, it was mostly me, but yeah, eventually just, I remember talking to my mom before I did it, even though I was like in my late 30s, I asked my mom what she thought. And then I just told my boss that, you know, I needed to go do my own thing. And fortunately it worked out. Like it could have easily not, but it did. So
could you just sort of elaborate this business of yours, Legiit? What does it actually do for people?
Sure. So I mentioned I was doing some SEO freelancing. I was using a website at the time that was kind of like a marketplace. And I started doing well. I got a sale, and then I got another sale, and then like an influencer endorsed my services, so I got a bunch of sales. And I was doing really well through that. But in time, the owner of that site like lost interest in it, and then it started being hacked, and it was crashing and things like that. So I just started selling stuff through my own website. And I had made friends with some of the freelancers on that site, and they were like, can we sell through your website too? I was like, well, maybe I'm on to something here. So I partnered with a developer who was a customer of mine on the other site. And we launched ours, which is at that time was just going to be a place for people that sold things like SEO and programming and marketing services to just sell their stuff and people to buy their stuff. So we launched that, thinking it was just going to be like an extra product for my SEO business. But within the first month, it kind of took off. And that's been, you know, over 7 years now. Now, the goal in the beginning was just to be a replacement for that other marketplace. But since then, we've like established, we've thought about who we want to help and what we want to do. And what we really want to do is help businesses, empower businesses to do whatever they need for their business themselves. So there's other marketplaces, I don't want to name them, but like, I'll just name them, like Fiverrs and Upworks and stuff like that. They try to appeal to everybody. We want to work specifically with businesses. So what we did on top of the marketplace was build in like some software where you can just enter in like your website and ask like 2 or 3 other questions. It'll tell you what's going on in your business, what's your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then it'll connect you to people that can help you solve those weaknesses, or it can teach you how to do it yourself if you prefer. So our goal is to give businesses, we call ourselves a B2B growth engine, is to give a business everything they need to grow or scale or fix their issues or whatever it is. So because we believe that businesses are how people make positive change in the world. So that's how we try to facilitate that.
And it sounds like to me that your business model would mostly benefit, not mostly benefit, would be a massive benefit to startups and engineering companies who are trying to get off their feet and get something going, but they're struggling to sort of make those first steps to success. Yeah,
like a lot of what we have right now is SEO, because I had a big following in the SEO space, but we also have marketing and things like that. And in my experience, the kinds of businesses that you're mentioning, the startups and things like that, don't have the skill or don't have the time to figure out how to do all that stuff themselves. Or if they know how to do it, they don't have the time to implement it themselves. Having done bootstrapped a couple of businesses myself, I get it. So yeah, that would be ideal. Like they could figure it out we could help them figure out what they need and then help them find people to do it so they can focus on making their product better or whatever it is. It depends on when I think of startups, I think of software as a service. That might not be exactly what you mean, but that's where my mind goes when you say stuff.
This is a very interesting concept. Software as a service, hardware as a service. It seems to be a growing sort of industry. This concept of things being as a service. So let's take, for example, a typical hardware engineer who's got a new idea, wants to change the world, is interested in trying to make a difference. As someone who has seen multiple startups try and get their ideas to realization, what would you say is the biggest pitfall that they face, the biggest hurdle that they have to try and get over before they can even begin their journey?
Making sure that their product actually is something that people actually need is one mistake I see a lot of them make. Because they think it's a great idea and it's something they're really excited about, doesn't mean other people will. So before you invest, quit your job and invest hundreds of thousands or millions or however much, or take on investors, make sure it's something that people actually want. And then by launching a minimum viable product, I think that's a mistake a lot of people don't do or make, I should say. And then from there, understanding that getting the product really, really good is important, but also getting people to be aware of it is equally or more important. I like to illustrate it. I like to, it was the generation of console games. There was the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and the Sega Dreamcast. And technologically, the Sega Dreamcast was far superior, but nobody bought it. So, making sure that people buy your awesome product is just as important. So that's a mistake.
I wasn't aware that the Sega Dreamcast was better than the Xbox. Was it? In terms of hardware?
I mean, it was ahead. Of course, it's subjective, but I mean, it was ahead of the curve on like online gaming and like graphics, and a few other things it was much ahead of its time, but it just never caught on.
But like you say, it doesn't. And I think this is a really common issue, which I tend to see as well, which is that when someone's product doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that the product is bad. It could be a fantastic product. It's like you say, if there's no demand for the market, then it just simply can't grow. So right. I also think it's important that engineers understand, or certainly the people who are building these new designs, they have to realize that just because they think it, and it could be an amazing idea, doesn't mean it's actually going to work. And that's not necessarily their fault.
Right. Apple is a great way to explain that to people. Like they needed Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, or it wouldn't have worked without either of them, because Steve Wozniak knew how to make the products and Steve Jobs knew how to get people to buy them. So
yeah. And like I say, actually, I think that's a fantastic analogy as a comparison, because Steve Wozniak was the brains behind all the machines and he knew how to put them all together. But without Steve Jobs, it was just another computer sitting in someone's bedroom doing nothing besides whatever it was that he wanted to do at the time. It took Steve Jobs to go to the right people, find the investors, push the product out there, and then improve on the aesthetics of the product and what it should do, because he understood the market better than Steve Wozniak. So, as you say, I think that's a fantastic example. Yeah,
Steve Wozniak would have given it away if it was up to him.
He would have given it away for free, and as much as many of us would have liked that, I'm fairly also certain that everything that Apple was and became would not have been possible had he given it away for free, which meant that they couldn't make their own developments and their own improvements and their own, essentially, small tech revolutions as a result.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a startup, you don't necessarily need to have two people, but you need to understand that you need to have both of those skills, and whether it's both you or if it's two people or whatever.
And I also think, like you say, by having multiple people, you can also bounce ideas off other people. You can get different perspectives, and so it also sounds like you're implying that, with the obvious exception of the fact that you need to make sure that your product is marketable, you also need to have more than one person who can look at your situation objectively.
Yeah, like we tend to be, and I don't think it's intentional, but we tend to be egotistical and think we have something great, and we tend to build products for ourselves, and we are not usually the target audience. Like with my platform, sometimes there are challenges that our customers will find using it and that I never thought of because I'm too close to it, or I'm trying not to insult my customers here, but like I'm more savvy than some of the users or whatever. So it's, your point that you can't think of everything and you are not the target audience, I think is an important lesson. And it's important to have other people on it. And it's, as a CEO, especially if you start making some money, it's important to have people that will tell you when you're wrong. I've seen that before too.
And that's actually quite funny, because I can say from personal experience, because I myself, I do a lot of independent freelance work, and I actually had a sales guy say to me one time, he said, Robin, if you learned how to talk to people and you learned how to approach bosses and CEOs and all this kind of stuff differently. You could have more customers. And I simply said, look, I behave and act in a certain way. And if I fall out with someone within 3 seconds, it means I'm not supposed to work with them, which is one of the reasons why I'm one of the few people who now works with Derek, the CEO of Ponoko, because we work really well together because we understand each other's humor. We talk in a certain way. I give him a complete blunt and honest opinion. And as a result, that shows you how good of a CEO he is, because he knows how to listen to what I have to say, and he knows that it's got value, and he doesn't sit there and get hyper offended by anything I might say. If I say, Derek, you're doing something completely stupid, he's not going to sit there and go, oh, I'm not interested, go away. He goes, oh, tell me why I'm stupid and how I can fix that problem.
Right.
And so how do you how do you approach that problem in your own business model? How do you try to find the faults and fix them before they become a real problem?
I think a lot of it goes to leadership and team. So you need people that are good at the things that you are not good at to help you find those problems, because I don't even know to look for certain things. You know what I mean? And if I'm not good at something, I can get serviceable at it, but I'm never going to excel at it. And plus, you can only do so many things as a CEO yourself. So you have to find people that are good at things that you're not good at, and that you mesh well enough with where you can work together. But if they disagree with you, they can tell you in a constructive way. And I say in a constructive way because that's important. Because some people would just go, that's a stupid idea, and that's not productive.
Exactly.
But they can say, if we do this, then we'll run into this problem, this problem, this problem. Maybe we should consider this, this, and this instead. So something like that. You have to have smart people that are willing to disagree with you, but in a collaborative way. And that's easier said than done. Like, you can't put that on a job listing. I need somebody that's.
I can be extremely argumentative.
Yeah.
Great, sign me up.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you do have to develop a sense of being able to read people and see if they're going to be a fit with you. And I don't know how to teach someone how to do that, but I think that's the most valuable thing in avoiding problems, is getting people that can see problems that you can't. Now, that said, as a CEO, your job is to see around the corner and figure out what the problems are going to be and anticipate them and make sure that they don't happen. But you also can't do it all yourself.
And that's actually an interesting way of describing the role of a CEO, because besides being the head of a company and being the representative of the company, it's interesting how you mentioned about trying to foresee problems before they happen. So how do you think hardware engineers who are looking to create the next big thing or trying to change the world, how do you think they could sort of deploy that kind of mindset in terms of looking for problems before they sort of manifest themselves?
I think being involved in the industry and in the community and knowing what's going on is a big part of that. So you can kind of like see trends, but also studying history. And I don't mean history like Roman Empire history. I mean history of your, although there is value in that too, but of your like industry and stuff, and learning to see trends and know what's going on and see where people are drifting. It's more of an art than it is a science, which is probably a little tougher for engineers, but it's that's how I do it. As I spend a lot of time on like Twitter and other platforms and just kind of reading what's going on and say, hey, this kind of seems to be the way things are going. Let me take advantage of that, or let me like pivot before that becomes an issue and be ahead of the curve and things like that. So I think that's kind of it's not really a solution, but another the way,
a trick, a way of like almost like a strategy to try and help improve your ability to see these problems.
Right. And the other thing is to get as much low-level stuff off your plate as you possibly can. So there's a lot of crap that comes with running a business, the coding, your expenses, and all that stuff. Get as much of that off your plate as you can, so you can use your peak brain productivity hours to think about.
And that is actually a big problem that I see a lot of CEOs facing. They have a horrible tendency to micromanage to the point where they're trying to solve problems that they simply shouldn't be solving, because they've got better things to do with their time. It's like you could have a business in crisis. And I have seen I have seen CEOs trying to deal with, let's say, oh, this website needs to be tweaked here, this thing needs to be doing that, let's talk about this piece of content. And it's like, your business is on fire. You need to focus on income and where you're going to get new customers. And I don't think it's a negative, but I can understand why they do it, because it's their baby, it's their child. Sure. They want to try and help the business in any way they can. But I think it can be very challenging, like you say, for a business owner to see to actually look at the problems and go, right, this is what I've got to focus on. Let someone else deal with that.
Yeah. It's a little off topic, but understanding how like the brain works helps me at least make those kinds of choices. Cause like I've learned that you only get like a couple hours a day of like peak productivity and peak like creativity. So I try to use those as wisely as I can and try to keep all that other stuff off of it and keep the decision fatigue from building up. So if you're wasting time coding your expenses and replying to emails and like saying this color doesn't look quite right, all that low level stuff, which
that should be done when your brain's basically stopped working.
Right, like at the end of the day, and it is important stuff, but somebody else should be doing it. Or if you're not to the point
it's not mission critical.
Right, if you're not to the point
to the success of your business.
Right, if you're not to the point where you have other people that can do that, then you start your day off with the most important things that are going to move the needle as much as you possibly can until you run out of juice, and then you can do the mindless. This was expense. This was all that crap. So you can see what I don't like doing from the fact that I keep using that same example.
Yes, I can. It's quite clear that your favorite hobbies include microtransactions, sorting out accounts, and choosing colors for your business.
Yeah.
But speaking of your business, so let's say I'm a hardware engineer. I've developed a new product. How would Legiit help that scenario?
So it depends on what approach to marketing you're wanting to take. If you have a new product that is before the point where search is going to help, it won't help you do SEO, but you might be able to find like a good like a web designer to handle those color changes and shit. Pardon my language. I hope that's
Don't worry about it. This is a completely open, uncensored podcast, so don't worry about it.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. But to handle all the color changes and things, you can find people to help you with, like, you run into a bug and you don't know how to solve it. I still think from software, but I'm assuming that hardware engineers have similar problems.
I think they're basically the same problem, I think.
Okay. Or, whatever. You can find people to help you do the things that you don't want to do, don't know how to do, or know that you need but don't know how to start, I guess. Because there's things that we all know we need. Like, I know I need to have an internet presence, and nobody knows what that means beyond that. So you can do a lot of things like that. And once you have a website, we can help you figure out everything you need to market it as well.
Now, earlier in the podcast, you talked about things like you said you had a service whereby people could offer what their business services, such as marketing, web development, all these different things. So, if you're an engineer and you want to build a new product, but before you actually commit to designing the thing, you want to find out if people want the product first. Is that something that your business could help with in terms of research and trying to find out if that idea could or is feasible?
We do have some people that do market research, which is, I think, what you would be looking for. So yeah, you could, you would want to, talk to different ones, because it's kind of a marketplace. So you just talk to the different ones and see who has the experience and like who you vibe with. And I'll try to talk a little Gen Z there, who you vibe with the best.
Oh. These generations these days, honestly.
But yeah, you could hire someone to do the market research for you. Now you're going to have to help a little bit. You're going to have to understand because you're always going to understand the product better than somebody you hire, no matter who it is. But yeah, there are definitely people that can help with that.
Yeah, and so let's say so like you say, let's say I'm looking for someone who specializes in marketing to make sure that the product that I want to put out there is wanted. I would go onto your website as a marketplace. I would basically look for someone with marketing experience, and then they would be able to help me, and you would essentially be the middleman that would sort of assist that relationship.
Yeah, more or less. Like the analogy I use to help people understand the way it works is a mall. If you go to the mall has different stores in it, and you buy something from, I don't even know what stores are in the mall these days, from the Gap. And the Gap is the store you would buy it from, and then it's in the mall. So we're the mall. We get a percentage of what they make. Yeah. And then they do the service, and then you get the result of that service. So that's kind of conceptually how it works.
Now, when it comes to Legiit as a business, what I would like to know is, what would you say is the most exciting project or the most exciting sort of thing that happened in terms of like hardware projects or an example where someone took an idea and made it something real?
We have so many businesses, it's hard to really say, but it's for me, what I get the the most, and it's not really a hardware engineer type of thing. I mean, we have some people that do that. It's not our biggest niche, but for me, it's the small businesses that we have that use it to figure out the marketing and the growth on their own, and have gotten tremendous results. Like I'm thinking of one person in particular. He has I don't totally understand what he does, but it's like some sort of home service thing with like gutter cleaning and then roofing or something like that. They figure out how those guys just want to do their job, but they also want to grow, and they've used our platform to figure out what they need to do and then got people to do it and have shown me some of the financial results and what it's meant to them. So stuff like that. And I say that because any type of business can really do that if they need to grow. So whether it's a hardware engineer, which seems to be most of your audience, or whatever, we have people that can help you grow, and seeing that growth happen on a few different occasions. I have a wall of testimonials, but that's very gratifying to me because it could have just been another product, but people really have changed their businesses and therefore changed their lives and then their customers' lives through that.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to marketing itself, what would you say is the biggest mistake that startups tend to make?
There's a few.
There's a few.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've already talked about it a bit, but marketing to the wrong audience, not having a well-defined customer avatar, is a big mistake that a lot of them make. They don't, and I say that because I did it myself. But that, and then some of them grow too fast. They don't realize that if you scale is great and lots more sales is great, and you want that, but you can all stuff starts to break when you start to make more sales, and you can't meet the fulfillment, or you can't pay your contractors, or you're getting. And
then I'm guessing that can then have a negative impact because then people see you as being unreliable, and then customers drop off.
Yeah, or things like you sign a bunch of deals, but you don't get the money for those deals until they're done, and then you don't have the money to pay to fulfill those, and stuff like that.
I know a great example of this, and I'm not sure if you are aware of this example, but I think back in the 80s there was a company, a computer company called Acorn in the UK.
Okay.
And they were making computers that were quite expensive, quite big, and they couldn't compete on cost with, let's say, the Spectrums from Sinclair. And what happened at one point, if I remember correctly, they had sort of a promise of an order from a large retailers, WH Smith. So they said, we want 180,000 Electron computers, these new small ones that we're going to make that are cheaper. So Acorn bought and manufactured all these machines, but they didn't have the contract in writing.
Oh, wow.
And then what happened was that WH Smith went, we don't know anything about this order. And then they had 100,000 machines in storage they just couldn't sell. And it was basically one of the straw that broke the camel's back in that situation. They ended up closing the business because they had all these machines, and like you say, they didn't get their marketing right. They didn't get the contracts in place, and they grew too fast, and then they couldn't sell them.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I binge watched all of Shark Tank, and the most common problem I remember seeing the entrepreneurs on that show have was that they got a big PO from Walmart or Target or something for their product, and they couldn't fulfill it because they didn't have the money. And that's why they were on Shark Tank, was to get Mark Cuban or Damon John or whoever to give them money to do that. So yeah, I've growing too fast, as weird as it sounds, is a problem. And a lot of startups, that happens a lot, particularly with Silicon Valley startups that get big investments, and then they go too fast.
So this is interesting then. If let's say I've got a business and it's growing really rapidly, how would I stop that growth being so rapid so that I could then essentially catch up with that manufacturing or demand?
I don't have a good answer for that, to be perfectly honest.
Because it must be hard to reject a customer saying, "Oh, can we buy some?" No, you can't, because we're absolutely maxed out. So that's a very interesting problem. But I wonder if that's something that Legiit could help with.
I mean, we can definitely help you with the growth. I don't know how we can help you slow down your growth.
That must be one of the most unusual things to ask. Our business is too successful. How do we become less successful? No one's ever really written a book about that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at that point it becomes a matter of you need more capital and you need more infrastructure and more people and more processes in place. I personally can probably at least somewhat help with some of that, but it's not really something you can solve without. I don't know. You would have to hire like an advisor or a consultant or a CEO or something like that to help with a problem like that. Thankfully,
But I suppose it's a good problem to have, though, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly better than the reverse of nobody.
I can't get enough customers. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still even a good problem is still a problem. So it's definitely if you get into that situation, you definitely have to be humble enough to go ask somebody that knows how to help, even if that means paying them a lot of money to do it. So I guess that would be my answer. As I don't think we could help you with that as much as I would like to say I could.
Well, there's always room for opportunity. Maybe you could be one of the first to actually find a way of helping customers manage that kind of growth. Because if I was a customer and I suddenly had a ton of, if I was a business owner and I had a ton of customers out of nowhere, I personally would basically have a panic attack thinking, it's great, but I wouldn't know what to do. And so you need someone who could step in and say, well, these are the best people to talk to. They can help you in these areas. And I'm guessing maybe that's what the Legiit marketplace could do. If I need that expertise, I can go there and find someone who could help me with that. But if we look sort of towards the next 10 years, where do you see your business going? And what challenges do you think are going to sort of come up?
So one thing that we've been doing a lot of analysis of what problems our customers have. And the biggest problems they had are that they don't know what they don't know, or they don't know what to buy to help themselves. And then the other one is there's so many things. I call it the Netflix problem. There's so many options. They didn't know. They ended up not getting anything because they had too many choices. So those are what we've been addressing. And the way we're handling the bigger of the two, which is the first one, is we built in some software to help them understand it. But we've built in some artificial intelligence into the platform, which I remember I told you that being ahead of the curve, and that's kind of where we're trying to do with that, is to take the 7 years of data that we have and use that to help businesses see what other businesses like them have done to make even more informed decisions, so they can figure out, so they don't have to guess what they need. So that's kind of the direction that we're going. And I think that as a general huge trend across all marketplaces, or not marketplaces, but all markets, is that individualized experiences are going to become more valuable and more probable as artificial intelligence becomes more advanced and accessible. Even stuff like healthcare, I think, will get that, because we're learning that healthcare, when you make generalized decisions that somebody's heart rate should be between 60 and 100, now we're learning if with AI we're able to see that this particular person's should be this. And so I think customized experiences for customers is going to be the trend of not all business, but many businesses, including like your hardware type solutions that can come up with things like that. I think that's the future of business for over the next 10 years, is personalized experiences.
Fantastic. Now, just before we wrap up this podcast, I've got one more question for you.
Sure.
For the audience who are watching this video, if they want to get involved with Legiit services and the products that you offer, what would you recommend that they do?
Just go sign up and connect your website. It takes less than a few seconds and it's free, and it'll get you started. You just go to legiit.com with 2 I's and go there. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook or YouTube or any other platform.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to see us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you.